So, biglang nag-crave. So, ayan, ito yung in-order, liempo. Sa ito, daddy. Ayaw mo?
Pangit ka siya. Tignan mo.
Ayan, mamaya, pangit lahat sa pala, ibibigay mo pa sa akin. Bigay mo sa guard. Uy, ano to isa?
Bangus. Sisig.
Yay, sarap. Tapos may ganito. Yes, ay, hala, hindi siya. Ay, hindi dyan part ng photo ko. Thanks. Sasawa ko.
By evening, the monotonous work was
Saan
over.
ka ba?
The future giants lined up on the field. Now, there's only one thing left to do. Enjoy the result.
Patakamin ko kayo.
We'll have to wait a few in-game years until the trees reach their maximum growth
Baka-dinner
stage.
lang natin ang
The
lechon.
growth process here is
Kain na
divided
lang.
into three
Si
stages.
Charmaine.
The first stage comes pretty quickly. The trees are still quite saplings be put into the ground. After another in-game year, the second stage hits. We see genuinely large, well-formed trees, but they still haven't reached their limit. Cutting them down right now would be economically unprofitable. And finally, the third stage arrives.
Lama?
Full maturity.
Sama ito?
Just look at how deep it's become. The forest turned out dense and impressive. It's time to move on to phase 2 of our plan. Right on our lot, I bought and placed a large sawmill that would process the timber. Next, I needed to prep a whole fleet of vehicles for the job. I bought a small, maneuverable loader to handle the finished products, forestry harvester to cut the trees, and of course, a spacious truck with a trailer to transport all our finished products. Even the logistics stage didn't go without minor hiccups. The little loader just wouldn't drive onto the trailer bed. It didn't have enough power to overcome the ramp angle. I had to improvise. I brought in a larger vehicle and just gently pushed it up from behind. The equipment took its places, and we headed out to the field. Let's start the logging. I drive up to the first tree, just as I calculated when lines are long and perfectly straight. For production, this is the best option. But what I didn't account for was the game's physics and the planting density. The tree gets cut, but it falls incredibly awkwardly. Its branches catch on the neighboring, still standing trees. The trunk gets suspended in midair, and getting it out of there is quite
Ang dami chicken ko.
As soon as I somehow yanked the first trunk out and
Ang
solved
baling
the
ganun.
problem, the next one immediately popped up. How do you properly rotate such a massive tree to deliver it exactly to the sawmill's drop-off point? This task turned out to be a real trial. I drove the harvester from different angles, tried to regrip the trunk, and spent a ton of time and effort maneuvering. After several minutes of stubborn struggling, I finally managed to put it where it needed to be. But that was just the first tree out of 100. I quickly realized my mistake. I urgently needed to change my forestry equipment. While I was thinking over buying a new machine, I opened the factory menu and started the production line. I chose to manufacture wooden walls. It's the most convenient and profitable option since making them doesn't generate a byproduct like wood chips. Honestly, logically speaking, that sounds weird. Where does the waste go? The game mechanics are working in our favor right now, and that's what matters. The price for finished wooden walls also made me really happy. In good months, it reaches around $9,000 per unit. We're off to a start. One tree processed, 99 left to go. I headed to the store and bought the next, much more impressive logging machine. Based on its specs, it was supposed to completely solve my difficulties. Its main feature is that it can cut and hold 2 trees at the same time. Given our dense planting, this sounds like the perfect solution. But I wouldn't be me if everything went smoothly here either. I drove up to the trees, grabbed them, started cutting, and immediately messed up. The trees turned out to be way too tall and heavy for this machine's center of gravity. As soon as the trunks detached from the stump, my expensive new equipment just flipped onto its side. It feels like this forest is resisting being cut down with all its might. And honestly, I kind of get it. I had to improvise again. I fired up our little loader, drove over to the down harvester, lifted it slightly, and managed to put it back on its wheels. After this incident, I decided not to get greedy. We saved the vehicle, So now we're cutting strictly one trailer at a time. With the new approach, things went much better and more steadily. 5 huge trunks, one after another, went to our factory's
Oo,
receiving center.
palabok.
The process started to turn
Siya mo?
into a routine. But then, the sixth
Anong
tree
masarap?
decided to remind me who's boss.
Ayun
I
pala.
couldn't grab it
Asan?
dead center, the balance was thrown off,
Wala.
and it just slipped out of the grip, crashing to the ground.
Hindi na lang
I
yan.
stared at this fallen trunk and had no idea what to do with it. I hadn't prepped any equipment for picking things up off the ground. In the end, I couldn't think of anything better than just leaving it there, moving on with the rest, and trying not to get upset over losing my rhythm. But my rushing led to another thing. Reversing with yet another cut tree, I ran over some branches and stumps, the results of my previous mistakes. The
Ayun
machine
na.
swerved and I flipped over again. Navigating the logging site was getting harder and harder.
Uy, mga
The ground was littered
laman-laman.
with offcuts and abandoned trunks. Little later, I stubbornly continued to fell the forest. After a decent amount of time, the factory processed the incoming timber, and we accumulated quite a lot of finished wooden wall pallets at the outlet. Time for logistics. We need to start loading them onto our large trailer. At first, I had serious doubts. Could that same little loader I used to flip machinery handle the heavy pallets? But to my surprise, it performed excellently. It turned out to have a good counterweight, and while loading the first tier, it didn't even try to tip over once. Sometime later, the first level of the trailer was completely filled with pallets. There was still plenty of room, so I decided to try stacking pallets on a second level. I hooked the cargo, raised the boom to the max, but our little guy just couldn't lift the pallet to the right height. It simply didn't have enough boom length. Naturally, that didn't stop me. I opened the store and bought another loader, significantly larger and more powerful. Surely this one should handle this tough task with no problems. But I wasn't wrong. Working with the new equipment was very comfortable. The pallets laid down perfectly flat, and soon the second level was completely full. Looking at the loaded trailer, an ambitious thought popped into my head. Could I build a third level? That would save me a ton of time. I grabbed another pallet, raised the big loader's boom, drove up to the trailer, and failed again. We ran into exactly the same problem. The boom length fell short again, by literally just a few dozen centimeters. The thrill had taken over. I decided to buy another loader, this time with a telescopic boom. I drove it up, tried to load, but even its capabilities fell a bit short because of the dimensions of the walls themselves. I was unstoppable at this point. I opened the heavy machinery tab and bought a huge industrial excavator with a grapple. Well, this monster absolutely had to solve our height problem. I tried carefully grabbing our walls from the top. I tried bringing them in from the side. But man, it was such a shame to realize that due to the physics of the grapple and the pallet dimension, even if we placed the third tier evenly,
Parang ayaw na patawad ko
I
ngayon,
spent a
Mang.
ton of time and money on these experiments, but getting a perfect third level
May
just
nalalasan ako
didn't
dito
work
na
out.
sa suka ko.
At one point, a crazy thought even flashed through my mind. Take the excavator and use it to lift the big loader along with the pallet. But I stopped myself in time.